Welcome to Straight Talk Real Estate with Ken Paletzky. I'm Ken, and I've been helping buyers, sellers, and investors navigate real estate for 30 years. And over the last several weeks, I have been providing a series, and we've broken down the entire buyer brokerage services agreement piece by piece and what it looks like for you as the buyer that's signing an agreement, because it is state law to be in an agreement with an agent when you go to start buying houses. And so I want to bring it all together now. This is my last wrap for this as we get to move on to some other pieces and contingencies and things like that we'll be providing to buyers. And we're going to be moving into some listing agreements. If you're a seller and you've been tuning in, want to learn more about that, we're going to start those series here shortly. But before you sign anything under a buyer's agency agreement, you should understand exactly what you're stepping into. And that's what this series has been about. So where you break it down and understand it completely. And the things we've actually covered is what this agreement has in all of the paragraphs or line items in it. It's not just paperwork. It actually defines your relationship with your agent. And that should also be done when you do a buyer presentation. This is the agreement you sign, but the buyer presentation is where we break down what our services would look like. We would give you the big picture of what the buying process looks like in a flow chart. You know, it's kind of like a big puzzle, right? You see the box, there's your house. You're looking at it like, that's the house I want. You open the box and there's 1,000 pieces, and then you're like, oh my God, I don't know where they all go. Realtors actually help put that together for you. They know exactly where all those pieces fit in, and they know who to help you with. So this agreement is the starting point for that. It's not just, it's not just the beginning. It's actually the entire process. And we talked about term and area was the first part, right? When you're talking about term and area, these are areas of when you are looking at the area you're going to buy in. You might just want to say, in our area, we're in Tri-Cities or Southeast Washington. It says if you leave it blank that it's the entire Washington state, because we're licensed in the state of Washington, so it would cover the entire state. However, if you just want to be in a certain city like Pasco, you might specify, I just want to look in Pasco area and only look at that. The term is actually how long the agreement stands for, right? I mean, it could be 120 days, 180 days, 6 months. It could be 90 days, 30 days. It's depending on what you want to have in there, because there is no get out of contract if things aren't working out unless you come to an agreement later. But this is where that piece would go into. And we broke down agency, the exclusivity or non-exclusivity. That's what agents, who represents you, and what level of service are you going to get, whether it's under the dual agency, which we talked about pretty extensively, and this limited dual agency. And we talked about the limitations of that are, they are just a navigator or a facilitator in writing a contract. They can't help sway one side over the other when it comes to terms, price, any of the negotiation skills. So dual agency is one of the things we kind of warn people about. Don't just go to the listing agent and write up a contract with them when they already represent the seller, because how well do you think that they're negotiating for you? Yes, they may know more about the house, but the reality is when they represent a seller and they represent you in the same transaction, their services become limited. There's no longer confidentiality. There's no longer swaying one side or making recommendations on a price or terms. They have to stay very limited and neutral in that case. And we talked about compensation, how agents get paid, and how that impacts your offer in the agency agreement, where it's fully negotiable, and how you set that up. And we talked about the gap of that, if the seller isn't paying quite as much and you're asking for it in the purchase and sale agreement, of what that gap would look like. And we talked about the protection, meaning how long does it last after your agreement has expired. If you were to go back and find the same house that your agent had showed you under the agreement and you buy it, do you owe that agent compensation? The answer is yes. And that's in an earlier episode as well. So definitely tune in. I hope you subscribe to the channel, because there was a lot of good content put in here. We did our job and making sure that we didn't just explain it, but we put some graphs up on there so you can kind of see it in the paragraph structure of what it's set for. And we just kind of try to make as much detail when we talk about all of it, so that you're completely understanding it, right? It's transparent, because that's what this law was built on. Even though buyer agency agreements have been in place for years, all of these new things we've been talking about, the compensation, the terms and time, a lot of it is just recent, right? The referring, if you're being referred to a company, that's all in recent contracts. So that's why we took it down. I've been using buyer agencies most of my career, to be honest with you, but I wanted it for loyalty. It was always historically the seller just paid compensations, and that was covered by them. Nowadays, they are still paying them. If we negotiate a good, strong offer and they look at their net, they might be willing to do that. But the reality is this compensation is actually build back or responsibility, not build back, but the responsibility of the buyer. And but if we can get it, the seller to pay it as we negotiate, that's a win for our buyers. And we're doing a really good job of that, probably 99.9% of the time. But if there's a gap, then we really feel like it's a win because we got the seller to pay the majority on in that, and then the gap just goes to the buyer. When the agreement ends, we talked about that, and if you wanted to switch agents, we actually just did our last episode was basically if you were unhappy with an agent and you're looking to cancel, how would you go about that? In the process of actually giving the agent the benefit of the doubt, going and having a conversation with them first, then the managing broker, and this would be personality issues or maybe overcommitment and they didn't meet the mark. Maybe they just had a bad day, and so give them a little bit of break. You have that meeting, you kind of set them straight, and they get back on track, and then they start overperforming for you, and that's what you're looking for anyway. Because the end result is you want someone in your corner, and you want an agent you can trust and someone with experiences in these matters, so that they are protecting you and helping you write winnable offers and negotiate the best terms possible. So here's what it comes down to: the buyer brokerage service agreement defines how you are as a buyer represented, right? And they're exclusive or non-exclusive, and what that is going to look like should be spelled out to you in not in the contract form, but what the agent's value propositions are. When they're looking at the value propositions, they're going to be looking at how they're going to go over your wants and needs analysis, how they're going to apply that into their searches and notifications to you, what their communication style is going to be like. I probably should do a podcast or a video or guide, and that would give you a good understanding of what things you should be looking for. If you message me, I'll be able to send you some top questions as you interview agents on the things that you should ask. So you could always reach out to me that way as well. So it also defines, how are you protected, and how will you compete, right? When you write offers, and because that compensation factor is now written into the purchase and sell agreement, you need to understand how that's going to compete with other offers that are out there. And we broke that down in the compensation pieces of that. So it's also about strategy, clarity, and making some better decisions when you go through that process of understanding it clear when you're looking at all of the things that are involved in the buyer brokerage agreement, then just reflect back over to the purchase and sell agreement, and in the end into your negotiations. So one question, you might be thinking is, what should a buyer do before signing? I think it's a great question because I think these are to the fact of sending you questions, these would be some that you could write down yourself right now. Do I understand how long I'm committed? That would be something to know, right? Is this a 1-year commitment? Is this a 6-month commitment, 90 days commitment? I mean, right now, the average days on market for homes in the Tri-Cities area is just under 90 days. But it doesn't mean that homes aren't selling in the first week if they're priced right? So then you might be a buyer that's actually got some specific needs, and so it's a little harder to find. So your term might be a little bit longer. Do you understand how your agent's being compensated? That is a great question. That will be on your buyer agency agreement. The compensation is going to be written right in, and it's negotiable between you and the buyer agent. And they can say no if you try to ask for something less than what they're willing to work for. Then you just go find an agent that may be willing to work for that amount. And if they say yes, that's what your agency agreement will be for, and that's what they'll be asking the sellers for on your behalf, or you can pay it directly. Do you understand how you're being represented? And I think you should probably have gotten that from that episode. It's very clear. You can be exclusive or non-exclusive, and then there's pros and cons to both. We went through all of that. I can just tell you that an agent wants that loyalty, right? They're looking at exclusivity because they're going to feel like they're going to work harder for you. They're going to perform better versus you go out and start dating other agents, right? Do I feel confident in the person I'm working with? This is going to be on that transparency, the rapport, the trust, the morality that you're going to sense when you're working with someone, and things like that. So don't sign an agreement if you don't feel comfortable, because you're stepping into a contract that is binding and you don't want to be doing that. This is really about stepping into a professional relationship when you sign this contract, that you're actually trusting and you have confidence with the agent you're going to be working with. And this is why it's important that you understand it all. So from my perspective, the goal isn't about getting you under contract with the buyer agency agreement. It's about to help you make good decisions, right? I want you to make the right decision when you sign it and understand what you're getting into when you do it, because not all agents do a great job of explaining it to you paragraph by paragraph. I am gifted because I can read the paragraph upside down right in front of you. We can pull it up on our big screen in our conference room and sometimes explain it that way. So it's just right there in your face. Making good decisions and signing with someone that actually has that ability to put that trust in you and confidence by explaining the process through it and getting you in the best position to win your offers, and explaining that on the strategy when it comes to the guidance of time, money, and taking out the stress, right? So here's the bottom line. This isn't about what you're signing as far as an agent agreement. It's about what you understand before you sign. So don't just get caught up signing on electronic signatures if you haven't met with your agent to have it explained to you thoroughly, because I don't think you're going to follow along as clearly unless you follow along with this series that I put together of what you're signing paragraph by paragraph, because there is some confusion on it. And we find that agents and buyers can actually get confused on what the paragraphs are saying in the contract. So know before you sign. Understand that. And the takeaway from the series that I hope you got was an understanding the agreement, your understanding of your representation when you sign with a buyer agent, how the compensation works, and how all of this is going to impact your offer when you're writing it, because it's actually written into the PSA or the purchase and sale agreement as you structure an offer in front of the seller, knowing that the sellers are looking for the net when they go to accept an offer. And sometimes it might be timing. If it's a hurry, they got to move or something like that. But most of it, in my experience, it comes down to what their net proceeds are going to be. So if you've made it through the series, you now understand more about the buyers going into the market, buyer brokerage services agreement. And there's plenty of buyers out there that don't know as much as you if you got through it. So that's great. Your next step would be, let's have a conversation if you want. I'm happy to walk you through your situation, get you help started the right way and explain it, and get you on a path to home ownership. If you found this helpful, please subscribe. It's the only way we know that people are actually watching them is when they subscribe or share. So I'm going to continue breaking down the real estate industry any way I can to help you make better, more confident decisions. I'm Ken Pilecki with Straight Talk Real Estate.